like to take a few minutes and introduce all of the panelists. As you can see, we're a big group. There's one seat that's free. So if anyone would like to come and join us, we've got a vacant seat. Otherwise, we'll get going. So I'm going to start all the way down here on my right, so to your far left, so far away I can hardly see him. We've got Anti Aumo. Antti is an executive director with Business Finland. Business Finland is the national promotion arm of the country of Finland. Within Business Finland, he heads the Invest Finland division, which is responsible for attracting investment and promoting Finland worldwide as an investment location. Right next to Antti, we have Pilar Moreno. Pilar has a very similar role. She's the head of investment attraction and aftercare and retention for CINDE. CINDE is the investment promotion agency of the country of Costa Rica that has been very successful in recent years in attracting investment. So thank you, Pilar, for coming all this way to join us. Next to Pilar, we have Fatima Al-Arabi, who's here from Geneva. Fatima is the CEO and founder of her own investment company, so she advises sovereign wealth funds, high net worth individuals, and companies on their investment strategies. Thank you for joining us. To my immediate right, we have Rudolf Loemeyer. Rudolf is the executive vice president within A.T. Kearney, the consulting firm for the Global Business Policy Council. That is something that's been around for over 2 decades and is I'd like to think of it as a club, but it's really an internal think tank where A.T. Kearney brings high-level CEOs and executives together with government officials to strategize and think about the future and how that's going to affect their countries, their governments, and their operations. Thank you, Rudolf. To my left, Joao Vascancelos, who's a senior advisor with Clearwater International, which is an international M&A boutique advisory firm. Joao was also previously Secretary of State for Industry in Portugal, and one of the main reasons he's on this panel is he was the originator and creator of Portugal's Industry 4.0 strategy. So very happy to have you here. Next to Joao, we have Lee Gibson Grant. Lee runs 2 things, and this is the first time I'm going to look at my notes because too many acronyms here. But Lee runs 2 things in Moldova called the DTX project and the DTMA project. I'm not even going to try and explain to you what those are. Lee will do that later. They're related to blockchain, which is also tied into our subject today. And then Henrik Von Scheel, for those of you who missed the presentation, but I think most of you were here, is the originator really of the Industry 4.0 concept and one of the leading thinkers and strategists and practical advisors in that field. So having introduced the panel, I'd like to start with the basics. So we just heard about Industry 4.0, what it means. We hear about it all the time. We read about it in the press when we hear executives of big companies speak, when we hear someone from Siemens or GE speak, invariably they'll mention Industry 4.0. When we hear governments speak somewhere in their discussions about strategy, they'll mention Industry 4.0. Amazing, those of you who've been following the US-China trade dispute in the last week or 2, it's about Industry 4.0. The sectors that the US is targeting are those sectors that China has highlighted to be the most critical to their future. China's Made in China 2025 strategy, which is about Industry 4.0. So Industry 4.0 has become really a mark of competition between countries. Now, maybe because we hear about it so much, we kind of assume we know what it is. But I'll make a confession, I don't really know what it means. Okay? I've read up a lot about it, and Industry 4.0 is something that has so many different facets to it. It's also something that's often used interchangeably with things like the 4th Industrial Revolution. You hear about smart manufacturing, you hear about intelligent manufacturing, you hear then things that are kind of related like smart city, blockchain, artificial intelligence, and then I start to get confused. Okay? So what I'd like to do, and the way I'd like to kick off this panel, is to ask a few of the panelists in the simplest possible terms for my benefit, since I don't get it, to explain to me what Industry 4.0 means, what it looks like. Give me some examples in practice of Industry 4.0. So Henrik, I'd like to start with you as the founder and originator of Industry 4.0 as a concept. What does it mean?
So think a little bit about the 4th Industrial Revolution is the merge of a digital world, the physical world, and the virtual world. So that actually, when you hold your phone in your hand, you know that you have digital aspects into it, you have virtual aspects into it, and it's very physical. You have on your phone more than it actually took the rocket to come to the moon, if they came to the moon. But in reality, everything combines into one. So when you look at manufacturing, suddenly you combine the physical world with a digital world where everything is connected, and the virtual world where they virtually can look at the service flow, the process flow, which processes they need to align, so they can actually change their whole logistics, their manufacturing from throughout the whole value chain. This is not just a small thing, this is a big thing. So more and more in industries, when you think about it, the virtual world is something which you say, well, boys play games. No, the virtual world is real today in a digital world, and the digital world is real today in the physical world. These things are colliding and enable an economy around it, which is smart contracting, smart business, smart economy, smart trading, smart manufacturing. This is the whole concept around it.
Okay, that's really helpful. So this is where the physical world collides with the virtual world. So that's extremely helpful. So when you think of manufacturing and you think of, our old-fashioned view of manufacturing, people assembling things or things moving down an assembly line, that is coupled with data and it's coupled with intelligence. So that's brings us forward. You mentioned in your presentation Industry 4.0 and the fourth industrial revolution. I know, Rudolf, you do work in that field, and you've looked for some projects and some governments into the future. Would you see those two terms, Industry 4.0 and in fourth industrial revolution, as synonymous, or do you think there's a difference?
Thank you so much, Andreas. There's a really important distinction in our usage, and the essence of understanding it is to, or for us at least, is to conceive of Industry 4.0 as a narrower concept centered on manufacturing, and the fourth industrial revolution as a much broader whole of society, deeply pervasive phenomena. And as you say, we've done now national strategies for several countries in the fourth industrial revolution. Those strategy projects touch everything in the society far beyond manufacturing, even production. But within Industry 4.0, there's also a distinction in usage in our experience. On the one hand, more common in German or Japanese environments is a real focus on smart factories, on the production floor. And this is extremely reliant upon machine-to-machine communication and decentralized processes on the shop floor, if you will. And the American usage, and in fact, in our own work with the World Economic Forum on the future of production, so the other version of Industry 4.0 is more of the entire value chain of production, at which you can think of the factory floor as being at the center, but reaches all the way from supply, so it's really about supply chain, all the way to the customer. So then in brief, Industry 4.0 centers on the shop floor, smart factory, shop floor, whether it be really endogenous to it or its supply chain on the one hand. Fourth industrial revolution is whole of society, pervasive penetration of these technologies.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. I guess the question is, which one are we going to use today? And if the panelists agree, why don't we, for the time being, focus on the narrower of those two definitions. So really Industry 4.0 in the sense of industry manufacturing and how it affects that, rather than the broader, pervasive, across all of society definition. Everybody okay with that? Yep. Okay. Joao, you introduced Industry 4.0 to Portugal. You set up the Industry 4.0 project. Portugal is a company that has a country, that is trying to attract manufacturing and has been doing so quite successfully recently. Also has a local indigenous manufacturing base. Could you give us some really practical examples of Industry 4.0 in Portugal, how Portuguese or foreign companies there are applying it?
Well, thank you for this opportunity. For us, this is a priority. It was when I was in government, it still is a national priority, because the last three revolutions, Portugal only realized they were happening many years after they happened. So this revolution, we decided to be part. Because, and this is an opportunity for all the countries, because in this revolution, the geographic location it's less relevant than others. So if we wanted to be part of the first revolution, the second revolution, the third revolution, it was not possible. We didn't have the knowledge, the science, the engineering, the raw materials. In this revolution we have it, and we decided to be part. There's no roadmap for this. There's no GPS for this revolution. You must decide as an entrepreneur, as a government leader, to be part, and to be part of a movement and a process that no one knows where it's leading, but that it's happening. And this is very important to attract investment, yes, but this is very, very, very important to retain our actual industry. The majority of our factories, our biggest industries, are German, French. They dislocated to Portugal in the 90s, and to maintain them there, they must focus on efficiency, and they must focus on Industry 4.0 technologies. We have huge investments. Some of the biggest investments in Portugal are from Industry 4.0. And I'm not saying it's because of the government strategy, but because of the general awareness of the country as friendly for tech, friendly for innovation, attracted and retained huge investments. One of our biggest industrial investments is from Bosch. They made, for example, practical situations. They invested 50 million euros in additive manufacturing lab directly with a university in the north of Portugal, and they're hiring more than 1,000 engineers only for that lab. For a country as Portugal, this is one of the most important investments we could attract. And this is 100% 4.0. But even on traditional sectors, and I think this is the most important thing probably in this forum, imagine a normal textile, cloth industry. We have many in Portugal. They are a huge sector in Portugal. They are dislocating for other countries because of the costs. They are clothes and textiles, they are looking always for cost efficiency. We are retaining a lot of those companies because their customers are now not national traders. They are now e-commerce platforms. And they want to be totally linked 100% in real time with the factory. They want to have 100% automatized warehouses. They want to have a customization of all the products you are buying in the platform. You need to produce them immediately, and you need to have them in the customer home in 48 hours, 72 hours. That's only possible with Industry 4.0. So that allowed us to do huge investments on infrastructure. So we have almost 100% broad brand internet coverage of the country. So you can have an industry in any part of the country, you can be connected worldwide. We have a huge investment on education. So you can find the most qualified generation ever of Portuguese on STEAM, on engineering. Not only high degree, high level education, but technical courses, even in any part of the country. This was very important to attract investment. We have, for example, the interior part of Portugal is very poor. Never had big industries, never had big. We have Altran, it's an engineer company from France with almost 400 engineers in the interior part of Portugal. And this is one of the advantages of the digital. This was never possible with other sectors. This was never possible with other industries. And in the digital world, it is possible. You must have, in Europe, many countries use Industry 4.0 to attract investment because it's important for the image of the country to show that they are friendly to innovation. But I can assure you one thing. The big corporations and who is deciding the investments immediately discover if it is only marketing or if it is true. So you need to go deeper on this. They need to feel they are in an ecosystem of regulation, of universities, of communities that is really pro this. And this is a challenge. It's not, the easier part will be forbidden everything, forbidden the sharing economy, forbidden fintechs. It's the easiest part. And many countries are doing it, even in Europe and all around the world. We decided to do different. So you can use Uber, you can use Airbnb, you can use fintech companies in Portugal, but it's a challenge. Sometimes we commit mistakes, but we learn with them, and we develop.
That's great. Some really excellent examples there. Lots of good points which we're going to pick up on again. The preconditions that countries have to meet for Industry 4.0, the opportunities that it creates, especially your last point about this distinction between countries that prohibit certain things and are more closed and those that are open is a fascinating one that I want to get back to. But I want to pick up on your two examples because they're both very different. You mentioned Bosch, which is a traditional German, family-owned, I might add, company, traditional German manufacturer, coming into Portugal, setting up something new, a additive manufacturing, 3D manufacturing center. So that is a new type of activity that didn't exist before. It's a new type of investment that didn't exist in that scale 10 years ago. So there's an opportunity. But then you also mentioned the textile company that was probably at risk of leaving, and you could probably say the same for lots of industries, furniture, apparel, shoes, forestry products, lots of industries that are at risk of leaving, turning things around through the use of technology. So you have a case there of a company that is doing something traditional and old, but using technologies to remain competitive. So that's another type of advantage. So two advantages there, and I would like to maybe start with the first one, which is attracting new types of investment. Actually, let's look at both of them, and maybe talk to Pilar about this. Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a country that, despite its size, has attracted a large amount of particularly manufacturing investment across all sectors, electronics, lots of medical device manufacturing, and increasingly high-tech, sophisticated type manufacturing. So certainly not the low-cost assembly type manufacturing you might associate with Costa Rica. So these things have a big implication for what you're trying to do in terms of attracting companies, but also keeping the companies, and I know that's part of your role, keeping the companies that are already there. How are you dealing with this? How does it affect what you and Cinde do?
Well, thank you, Andreas, and good morning, everybody, and thank you for all the fellow panelists here. I'm going to tell you something here that probably, if I'm heard by my colleagues, they will, some agree or not, but we really, this all came to us, quite frankly, out of luck. It's really out of luck. Costa Rica did start with a very solid base of manufacturing when we decided to become a very, very open economy. We have managed to sign free trade agreements with 15 partners, making us partners to about 50 different countries. So the ability for a company to reach global markets from Costa Rica, which is right in the middle of the Americas, was key. It was one of the drivers that a lot of these manufacturing companies were looking for. And that was a solid strategy. It was based on, we're a small country, we couldn't really rely on our own. Let's really open our borders and find these trade partners from which we can all benefit. So with that came the other factor, which was education. We have invested in education for many, many years. About 8% of our GDP goes into manufacturing, and about 10% into health. So there was a solid base there for manufacturing companies to come and set up. And we attracted a couple of very pioneer, forward-looking companies. Some of you might know, but clearly Intel was one of them. And they moved and they did a lot of this knowledge transfer that our friend from the World Bank mentioned. It impacted the way that the manufacturing industry in Costa Rica changed, was very much geared with that knowledge transfer of this very high-tech visionary company. And then along came about 70 others from all sorts of different sectors. Currently, our major export is medical devices, and we have from class 3 up to very, very sophisticated companies that are supplying from Costa Rica globally. Now, going to and Andreas, I'm sorry to go back into the broader spectrum of Industry 4.0, because I want to attach a couple of other things. We then started attracting a lot of service-oriented companies, and ICT has become really one of our major exports. We export more service-related, software, IT-related products than tourism, which is a big income for our country as well. So here we are with very world-renowned high-tech manufacturing companies sitting in a country which is 50,000 square miles next to the IBMs and the HPs and the Cognizants and NTT Data and a bunch of others that also use Costa Rica as a hub to provide services to the rest of the world. And so what has happened eventually? Our vision as a country is that we have them all there. These game changers, these companies that are going to be doing the changes in all of this that Henrik is talking, the innovation part plus the productivity part, we have them all in a very small group of people. And we are very focused into transitioning those manufacturing facilities with the already knowledge that transpires between the manufacturing, the services within the country. So we have a pretty good case. We have companies in right now doing PC board manufacturing, Samtec, that is doing customized PC board manufacturing delivered to the customer within 24 hours. So we are also really thinking, how about e-health? Really, we have the Medtronics and the IBMs and the Watsons in Costa Rica. Why don't we really put them all together and really evolve into that ecosystem, which clearly have an impact in the way they manufacture. How are we preparing? We are upgrading our ports because clearly trade, as Henrik says, the way that the companies are going to be trading globally is going to change significantly. We have decided to work, there was a contract won by APM Terminals, a Dutch company, for $1 billion port. And clearly Costa Rica is small. It's not going to be the biggest port in Latin America, but they claim they're going to be the most efficient. And so taking into consideration that they are going to be a lot more automated, a lot more digitalized, and that they're going to need to be at the customer a lot quicker, that's where we see all the change. So what are we doing? As Joao said, we are working a lot on their retention, but it's not even a retention, it's their transformation to more innovation. A lot of them are working with their R&D. We have medical devices that they did go to Costa Rica for cost effectiveness, but now they have their big R&D centers next to them, and then they have the digital industry working into making their facilities better. So it is a very good story. I do have to say that there's two components that we have not maybe worked, and Henrik at some point, and maybe here my colleague from Finland can also work, is there's also the component of how the user is going to be changing the demand for these products. Because at the end of the day, the ability of the user to make the reviews, to immediately give back to the company and the company to do all this data analytics about their products and services, it's what's going to change even more the dynamics of their manufacturing. So I think that's also a topic that is interesting to discuss. I don't know if that provides enough.
Perfect, Pilar, thank you. And again, some really interesting points. Pilar tied it back to what Henrik said. This is the combination of the physical and the digital. So you don't often think of ports, right, with ships and containers in respect to Industry 4.0, but it's definitely a part of the equation, and you need the physical infrastructure for the digital to have an impact. So great points. I'd like to move over to more northern climes, to Finland. And Finland, depending on who you speak to, can be very different things. So for some people, Finland is mining, forestry, very traditional industries. For some people, if you go to Mobile World Congress trade show in Barcelona, it's 5G and it's very sophisticated technology. But rarely do you associate, or do you hear people associating Finland with manufacturing or production. So the question to Antti, and this is kind of a rhetorical question, but is this relevant to you, Antti? How important is Industry 4.0 to Finland and to what you do?
Thanks, Andreas. This is highly relevant for Finland, because when we look at manufacturing and Industry 4.0, at the same time we look at it with a knife on our throat, and also at the same time as tremendous opportunity. I think that requires a little bit of explanation. If you look at the evolution of manufacturing from Industry 2.0 to 3.0, in Industry 2.0, Finland has been losing. We're too expensive. And in the past few decades, I think we have lost 200,000 jobs in traditional manufacturing to countries that can offer lower cost performance than we do. And please remember, Finland is 5.5 million people, so losing 200,000 jobs is big. At the same time, we've been successful in Industry 3.0, so we have a good base of advanced, complex manufacturing in certain niche areas, and that's good. But traditional manufacturing, for us, it's gone. However, then looking at Industry 4.0 and listening to Henrik's breathtaking and inspirational explanation of what Industry 4.0 is about, if I take that into manufacturing context and simplify a little bit, because I'm a simple guy, I see two fundamental changes in Industry 4.0. First one is that data will be a fuel of productivity in a way never seen before. And Finland is very strong in IT. And the second fundamental change in Industry 4.0 I see is that factory will be connected to the outside world in a way never seen before. And not just your resourcing or your logistics, but to your product development, to your R&D, to your customers, to your partners in a completely new way. And connectivity is also an area where Finland is very strong. So I see great opportunities for us and any market focused on these topics as a part of the solution for Industry 4.0. Now, in the implementation towards 4.0, I see additional opportunity for Finland, which gives me further optimism, Andreas. And that's that I don't see that Industry 4.0 is that there's just one technology framework or one implementation process. I see it being very different from one company to another, because every company has their own needs and their challenges in terms of their manufacturing output, manufacturing flexibility, resource efficiency, many different aspects of the operation. And they are looking for all available technologies to provide the best possible return on investment for whatever their specific problems are. But then from one product to another, from one industry to another, from one business strategy to another, those solutions might be different. And we have been working a lot in Finland with the digital transformation of companies in very different industries. And we like to think that we are innovative, that there's a lot of innovation in Finland. And in fact, just before our presentation, Henrik was kind enough to say, and he promised I can quote this, that he sees Finland as the innovation center of Europe. Maybe that was just kind words from Henrik, but that's essential for Industry 4.0 because, as he said, so many things are changing, and all these technical opportunities that he outlined, if companies are unable to figure out what does that mean to our business, then they lose the opportunity completely.
Great, thank you, Antti. So I think you've added another dimension to this because, you know, we've talked so far about attracting investment, attracting manufacturing, which is different, or attracting new types of activities, such as 3D printing. But you've added a new dimension, which is really positioning yourself as the place to create innovation for Industry 4.0. So not just attracting other people who are doing it, but doing it yourself, or attracting people who can contribute to creating that innovation. So that's a very different dimension. And I think this oil is starting to point to different strategies that countries can take depending on where they're coming from technologically, depending on the base. We heard Costa Rica had manufacturing companies sitting next to IT and services companies, and all it took was for them to start speaking to one another. So really, the base of what you have plays a big role. Your cost structure plays a big role. So a lot of things that factor into this. I realize we have two panelists that haven't spoken yet. That's the disadvantage of a big panel. You have to be very patient till you get your turn. So I haven't forgotten about you. I'd like to ask Lee a question because Lee is currently involved in Moldova, working on a couple of initiatives around blockchain. So blockchain, again, is one of these terms that we hear all the time. And I confess that, again, this was something I didn't understand very well, but I found some really good articles that explain it in very simple terms, so I'm now a blockchain expert. But I encourage you to read up on it because blockchain is also something that is going to change a lot of the aspects of how we live, of how governments operate, how companies operate. But you sometimes see it, like on Henrik's slide, as part of Industry 4.0. You sometimes see it as a different type of technology. Lee, two questions. First of all, what's the relationship between blockchain and Industry 4.0? And secondly, what are you doing in Moldova?
So the simple solution with blockchain technology and Industry 4.0, the IoT market is combining itself right now with blockchain projects. Many projects which have raised lots of money through ICOs, and that's in the tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. They are doing applications for IoT, AI, converged with blockchain. Blockchain is a word which is of large hype. Last year, $3 billion was raised through ICOs for projects, but these projects don't always have use cases. The main important part to it is the blockchain technology. People think about cryptocurrency. Forget the cryptocurrencies, forget the Bitcoin. That's like an app on your phone. The blockchain is the phone. The currencies are simply an app. The blockchain, being as a distributed ledger, acts as a very good mechanism for security. The blockchain itself, till today, has not been hacked. Applications on top have been hacked, but the actual chain for storing of data has not been hacked. So when we take into Industry 4.0, we need to cater for the vast area of digital services. Smart cities, education 4.0, tourism 4.0, gambling 4.0, the list goes on. But we're gathering data all the time. And when you're wanting to implement Industry 4.0, you're prone to cybersecurity attacks. So this is where blockchain acts as an extra technology to secure that data. What am I doing in Moldova? Well, Moldova is a use case, and because most people don't actually know where it is, it's between Romania and Ukraine. They have 3 economic zones. They have the 3rd fastest internet in the world. But they have one disadvantage. They are the poorest country in Europe. They are also seen as one of the most corrupt in Europe, which means for investors, it's very, very difficult to look to invest into this country because it's classed as like a lower economy. So when you want to do Industry 4.0, you need to look at investors. So lower economies have a very difficult problem of bringing investment because they've got so many areas they've got to convince investors on. And most investors, they simply go by reports, statistics. And that is one of the negative parts for small countries or lower economies. So the actual use case with Moldova, it's very unique. It's landlocked between the CIS region and the European Union. It actually has trade agreements which for companies for manufacturing, import and export through the free economic zones, it has low salaries. It actually has a very high level of graduates, so they have lots of brains, they've got human resources. One of the things which everyone's discussing here, they have failed to mention about you've got to look after your human resources. When you bring in Industry 4.0, you need to have a higher level of educated people to maintain that. At the same time, whilst you're streamlining, creating more productivity, you may also damage the local economic job supply. In other words, you could be making more people redundant. So you need to figure out a way to provide the training and education for those people for new jobs. So with Moldova, the aspect of the blockchain is we have a very big project. There's 1,500 kilometers of PVC tubing which goes across the country, and it's to host another 5 fiber optic cables. One would be catered for the e-government so that they have their own network. One could be allocated to other mobile operators, and there's a fifth, which is the idea for servicing the smart cities, reducing the cost, digital universities. It's very hard to attract the investors, even though there's already an asset in the ground. Well, PwC made a report last year about real estate and blockchain, that it's the next phase. So if we take assets, national assets, infrastructure, which is required for investments into job creation, manufacturing, import, export. If we take this blockchain and we digitize this physical asset, and I'm talking from the perspective of lower economies, forget America, forget the European Union and so on, let's focus on the countries which cannot attract the serious money because of problems. By the digitization of these assets, you are now open to a new market. As I said, last year, around $3 billion was invested into developers building applications on the blockchain. If you are able to connect physical infrastructural asset for infrastructure, these projects which are raising money for applications, which are also for AI, IoT, education, they need use cases. But you can take that liquidity of market which they've used to start building your infrastructure for your higher education. So with Moldova, as I said, they have a very good high ratio of qualified degree people coming from university. The one thing is they lack is the attitude for the global market. They need to compete with the global market. And every lower economy country has to do the same thing. They've got to compete with the global market. And again, for investors and companies to come, there's a few things they look at. Is it safe to invest? Is the skill trade there? Do they have the human resources there? Do they have the trade agreements? Well, Moldova actually has most of this in place. It's there. It's ripe for the pickings for companies. But they are not getting themselves onto the level of the investors because they're lacking several areas of infrastructure, which investors say, oh, well, no, it's a bit too much for me to invest, there's too much to build. Then you have regulations, you have the policies, da-da-da-da-da. So by taking blockchain technology and utilizing the most phenomenal use case that it's got is raising funds. But the second part is the blockchain acts as a layer of security which is really needed for Industry 4.0, the security mechanism. If we can combine the national infrastructures which are needed, a very good example actually is over 90 countries, they have cooperatives. Cooperatives are social people which are buying shares from a community into their own little wireless network, social housing. The laws exist in place. And the surprising thing is 300 of the most successful cooperatives in the world account for $2.4 trillion. That makes them the 7th largest economy in the world. And many lower economy countries have cooperatives. So if you take these laws of cooperatives, you combine this with the digitization of assets, you can now go to the market to attract the investors. These investors become micro-investors, low risk, because you can tap into a $1,000 investor up to whatever they want to invest into. And you can comply to the regulations and the government because you're doing it under existing laws, but you're making that technology for transparency. Once you can achieve that, you can now say, well, we can now do our digital university, our Industry 4.0, and one of the biggest problems which we have, and this is a global case, is with Industry 4.0, that also meets digital universities, smart education. You would be very surprised for the US, the UK, European Union, many teachers cannot use the digital platforms that are provided. That means if the teachers cannot use it, they cannot increase the higher education, provide the services to the students. So you have to find the bridge in between, the educational work group. But it all comes down to how do we get the governments to enable themselves to become an investee place where we can put the money safely, you provide the value. Well, it has to be a partnership with the governments. There are so many technologies out there now, especially around these blockchain startups. They need use cases. They need partnerships with government. They have money. So one of the regions in Moldova, which I'm working with, it's called Gaguzia. It's an autonomous region. It's part of Moldova. And if you don't know where Moldova is, you definitely won't know where Gaguzia is. It's the bottom part. Well, they have an idea which we put across because they have a free economic zone, they have an airport, it's just land. It's got the laws, they've got workforce, but they don't have the companies, they don't have the technology, the infrastructure. So we've been putting together a whole proposal to utilize the blockchain through digitization of that land as the asset, and as we build upon it, you can provide the infrastructure for companies to come and set up. It's the first way of doing it, and the idea of Moldova is because if you can do it there, it means you can do it anywhere else, specifically Africa, or Southern Asia, or Latin America. So does it mean that you have to do it from a national level? No. It's more easier to do it from a regional level, because they know what they want to do, and they may have the specific resources to do it. If you can do it in one region, you can then escalate that across. But the governments do play the largest part. They've got to be willing to play part of this. If they don't play part of it, then it's going to be a free-for-all. Everyone's going to struggle. They're going to try to do something, it will fail. And that's where Moldova, it has the opportunities. It has a regional government which has said, we'll go for this. Let's try it. Let's be the first one to give this a try. What have we got to lose? And they have the land to do it, and they're landlocked. They've got the trade agreements. So if Moldova can do it, anybody else can do it.
So that's encouraging. Few points I'd like to pick up there. First of all, thank you for describing the link between blockchain and Industry 4.0. That was very clear, at least to me. Makes a lot of sense. Two things that you brought up regarding the role of government, which I'd like to spend the rest of the panel talking about. The first one is providing use cases. So a lot of the companies that we discussed that are developing some of these innovations are not necessarily huge companies. They're not all Siemens or GE or HP or IBM. There are a lot of small companies out there that are developing new technologies, and what they need are opportunities to apply them, prove that they work, prove that they're commercially viable and technologically viable. And that's where governments come in, that's where investment promotion agencies come in to facilitate that and to provide use cases. And if you're lucky enough to be from a country or region where you have the leverage to do that and where you have the opportunity to provide use cases, that's going to help. I know that happens a lot here in Dubai. I know the Dubai government is really advanced in terms of providing use cases for new technologies, and that attracts investment. The prerequisite, of course, is that you understand what this is all about. And many governments don't, and many governments have a very, I would say, superficial way of looking at these things, and unless you really understand in depth or have people who understand in depth how these things work, you're not going to come across as credible. So that's key. Fatima, I haven't forgotten about you. We've been talking about investment now, and I know that a lot of what you do is advise sovereign wealth funds, advise very high net worth individuals on their investment strategies, which I would assume, again, I'm not an investment advisor, I would assume that you need to look at the future viability of what people are investing in. To what degree does this Industry 4.0, or more broadly put, the way Rudolf described it earlier, Industry 4.0 or Fourth Industrial Revolution in the broader sense, how does that impact or affect the investment decisions you make on behalf of your clients or you help your clients make?
Thank you. Totally agree on two things that my fellow panelists mentioned. So first of all, Industry 4.0 does not necessarily mean only manufacturing, because if you think about the opportunities and the challenges, they do apply to any industry, be it service, financial, healthcare, you name it. The other thing that you mentioned, which is extremely important, is if you want to prepare for the future, you have to understand it today. Now everybody is talking about these mega trends that are literally changing the roadmap of every strategic, every corporate, how to position themselves in the future in this digital world. And when we talk about digital, we talk about data, we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about adaptive robots, we talk about cybersecurity issues, we talk about cloud computing, all of those issues that in a way are, yes, there are, of course, challenges, which I'm going to talk about because they do apply on the financial industry as well, and which we take into consideration in our daily investments, especially for the sovereign wealth funds, whose objective is long-term and short-term. And we talk also about the opportunities of riding this positive wave. Yes, I do consider that it is very positive wave, although a lot of people are afraid that, well, it's going to make a lot of people redundant, a lot of jobs redundant. Yes, but it will not make skills redundant, okay? So it will be our choice whether to say some little robot will replace me in the future, or no, I'm going to take things in charge. I'm going to reinvent myself and work on my skills, because this is an era of borderless. Everything is borderless. Outsourcing maybe will become an obsolete word because you don't really need to go anywhere else. Everything is at the tip of your hands. Now, when we talk about digital words, and as soon as we mention the word digital, we talk about IT and we talk about big data analytics. So IT comes with its challenges. And for me, countries who can tackle these issues and who are prepared for those issues are the well-poised countries to attract more and more foreign direct investments, because we are going into a phase where consumer will become king and consumer can choose, because everything is at the tip of his finger, whether he is in his living room, in his gym, or wherever he is. So the main challenges are IT related. We are talking about IT security issues and IT obsolescence, because we know how quickly things change. Today you have a system, tomorrow it's a commodity, after tomorrow it's obsolete. So riding the wave and going hand in hand with this technology evolution. The other thing which is very important is how stable and reliable our systems are when it comes to the critical communication of M2M, machine to machine. Because you will have a lot of factories and you will have a lot of fields where machines will be communicating together more than humans, actually. So you have to have a safe and reliable system for that. Another thing is the snags, the IT snags. How many times we found ourselves grounded in airports because of an IT snag, and how expensive was it when there was an outage? So can we handle this? Are we well poised for all these challenges? And I mean, I can list you a bunch of things, but I want to go also to another dimension which is very important and which was mentioned, is the skill sets. What will be the skill required in 10 years or in 2020, 2030, which is, or tomorrow. What will the skill set required to survive, to compete, and to lead a good life? And of course, we go also to the issue of legal and regulations and the lack of regulations, because these are new issues that we haven't dealt with before. We have to be prepared for everything. If we want to prepare for our future, we have to understand it today. And last but not least, again, we go back to human. Yes, there will be some fully automated factories. There will be some zero employees companies. It will happen, but one can never negate the human skills that is required to keep everything in place. Now, again, if you see the challenges, they do apply on the financial world as well. We take this into consideration. We're very forward-thinking. We invest a lot now, and everybody's talking about it, in ESG and all these socially responsible investments, because we know the day will come where we talked about blockchain, where everything will be transparent. You cannot hide anything. Everything will be known. And then when those days will come, you know, this is actually the best thing, that it's kind of a honeymoon for the consumer, because this is where the companies will be competing on offering the best product service, maybe the most affordable one with the best quality. So not jeopardizing anything. So the recent mega trends that we are, to answer your question about the investments, we invest a lot about artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, socially responsible, sustainable private equity firms that are, that I see few years down the line that have to submit to everyone 2 balance sheets. One financial, with the, you know, with the ratios and the KPIs and everything, and one which we can call ethical balance sheet or eco balance sheet, I don't know, where they have to submit their contribution to the environment, let's say the carbon emissions, you know, how much they contributed. And then again, we go back to peer-to-peer, machine-to-machine, and how they deploy all of this to the best of the future of the humanity.
Thank you, Fatima. I'm going to ask the organizers if we can have an extra hour for this panel. Is that all right, David? No? Okay. It's unfortunate because I think we have more than enough to discuss, and I think an hour wouldn't do us justice. I'd like to ask one more question, and really to the entire panel, meaning not all of you should answer it, but whoever would like to, and then I'd like to open it up to 1 or 2 questions from you. So my first question is, we've heard each of the panelists talk already about some of the requirements or preconditions that countries or regions have to satisfy. We heard about telecommunications infrastructure, we heard about skills, we heard about regulations, we heard about governments providing use cases, we heard about governments understanding Industry 4.0, we heard about physical infrastructure. So, 2-part question. The first part is, what else are we missing? Is there a key thing that we haven't discussed in this panel that governments really have to provide to become an attractive location for this? And the second thing is something that Joao mentioned early on, this issue of openness, right? So I've been thinking throughout this panel, who are some of the leaders in Industry 4.0? China is trying to become a leader and is investing lots of money and is staking their industrial future on some of these technologies. China's far from an open society, we know that. Germany's a leader in Industry 4.0. I see a few representatives here from Germany, Trade and Invest. I live in Germany, I'm from Germany. We don't have Uber, we badly need it. Our banking is antiquated. I bank with a Finnish online bank because they're just exceptional. I just started a company in Germany. I thought I was living in the Middle Ages. I mean, I had to get paper stamps and pay things in cash, and I mean, it was amazing. But yet Germany is undoubtedly a pioneer and a leading country in Industry 4.0. So you really need to be an open society to be an Industry 4.0 leader. So those are 2 questions. Henrik?
I would actually turn it around. I would say it started in Germany, but only because Germany focused on manufacturing, because they needed to bring their GDP down, productivity. That's why the epicenter is manufacturing. But when you really see the leaders in the market and Industry 4.0, Germany kick-started it, but they stopped their breath. You know, they kick-started it, all the funding that was allocated was never really realized it. It was shining the pig. The real leaders in the market that are really adding to it is, for example, it's the country we're in right now. Because you can take the Industry 4.0 and take it at two levels. One is the productivity level, manufacturing very strong, or you can take it service level, where you're willing to invest, try. They're the biggest investment in blockchain here. They trial error. I mean, like the UAE is willing to invest in 10 companies and say, okay, we are okay that 4 fail. Because failure is an ability to learn how to innovate more. This is like humongous. I think that the Arabian Peninsula is at the pinnacle of really flowering again for the innovation around. For everybody of you that is here, if you want to start the Industry 4.0, here's some good takeaway. I'm just going to make it very quick. It's the quick and dirty ones. Don't get a consultant. You can do it yourself. Get clarity on what is it you want to achieve? Germany wanted to do productivity. Some other ones want to do growth. Focus on what you want to do. If you want to grow, focus on innovation. If you want to do productivity, focus on transformation. Focus on Industry 4.0 is all about people. People are the centerpiece of this. Why are people the centerpiece? Because people are capabilities, skills, mindset. They're the core differentiation in a company. You can adapt your skills, people can adapt. They use technology. Industry 4.0 is about technology, but the centerpiece of this is people. If you know what your people can do, then you focus on what is the core differentiation aspects I need to grow, to increase my productivity, and then you outline your accountability measure on which skills do I need? Which skills do I don't need? Do I need to compete with India's data scientists that have ad hoc tons of people doing algorithms, or do I need to do something else? So decide on what you're really good at and then compete on this. This is a competitive market. We are not friends. Also, we talk about the trade. Trade is tough business. We're only friends because you have something I want and I give you something I want. But it's about sharing forth and back. This is the core element of trade. So have something to trade for.
Great. What else? We've got time. Anything else we're missing? One of the special ingredients.
Yeah, I think we are missing one ingredient. These technologies, the majority of them are not still invented. And the companies that will bring these new innovations probably doesn't exist either. So a country, we did that in Portugal. We don't have any Portuguese company that it's actually a supplier of these technologies or a supplier for Industry 4.0. So we decided to have an enormous focus on startups, attracting foreign startups, and prepare a good environment for them to establish themselves in Portugal. So this is like the gold rush. Probably the guy that was selling the instruments to dig gold made more money than the gold diggers. And I think if today the main suppliers are German companies, Bosch, Siemens, ThyssenKrupp, etc., KUKA, well, that's almost Chinese company, but if those today are the suppliers, the future suppliers that they will born anywhere else. And all the countries should think on this. This is not only attracting the actual suppliers, it's to be prepared to have the new ones. And I think we need to have the focus. It's like he said previously, people, it's the focus. So attracting global mindset people, having the right schools, the right attitude. The biggest private employer in Lisbon, it's a company with 42 nationalities on their team. And this is really a company that represents the future. The future will be like this, no borders. So you must have a community that is prepared to receive this. And it's not easy. It's people from different religions, different cultures, totally different mindsets. They need totally different education systems for each characteristic ethnic group, and because of our history, we can do that, but many countries are not doing it. I think even in Europe, this is a strong message that we must always say. If you want to be prepared for this new economy, for this revolution, you must think on people and on different people, and they must live in the same environment.
That's, I think, a fantastic concluding message.
I think there's something else we need to ask ourselves. We're saying Industry 4.0, but we actually should be asking ourselves about Industry X.0, because everything in our day-to-day lives, every sector, it doesn't mean manufacturing when we say industry. Our day-to-day life is an industry. Education is an industry. They're all merging into one. So you might as well call it Industry X.0 because nobody knows the outcome. And as you said about consultants, there aren't that many consultants which know about half of these technologies, and these technologies are very, very premature. AI, everything, blockchain, it's still very early. We don't have the real use cases for it yet.
That's a good, I think that explains why there's so much uncertainty around this and why we need panels like this. David, will you let us have one question from the floor, please? So David is the moderator of the next session, and he's making his presence felt now, so he's putting us all under pressure. So if there's one, there you go. Well, one gentleman put up his hand. We have a question in the back. There you go.
Good morning. Congratulations for excellent panel. And my name is Ted Lago. I'm from Brazil, for the government of the state of Maranhão, the north of Brazil. And I have a very basic, simple question. Is what we do with the people? Where will people go? Because someone mentioned a fully automated plant. We're talking about cost, reduction costs. And the gentleman from Finland said he lost 200,000 jobs for other countries for automation. But what will happen when we have automated plants? Where the income will come from? Because this is a practical, not ideological question, by the way.
This is the million-dollar question.
It's a much faster cycle,
So
like Henrik mentioned.
Yeah.
In the
So
second,
where are all the people going to work?
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer because Finland was
You have an
specially
answer?
mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah, if for any government, if there's one thing you can do to prepare for Industry 4.0, is invest in education.
I was just about to say that.
Finland today has a strong high-tech business, but just 100 years ago, Finland was a very poor agrarian country. And what did we do? We educated everyone, and we educated them well, and we continue educating them lifelong. And that makes the difference. Jobs will not go away, but they will be fundamentally different, and you need new skills and good education for that. That's absolute must.
So education is the key. I don't think there's an answer to the question, where will they all work? I think everybody's still trying to figure out what is going to happen to people who, in the short to medium term, are displaced by technology, but I think that's a topic for another panel. I think we've used up all the time allocated to us. I hope the panelists are going to stay here afterwards for questions individually, so feel free to approach any of the panelists. I don't know about you, but I've certainly learned a lot. So this has been very valuable to me. I've learned a lot from each of the panelists. I wish we had more time, and I'd like you to join me in thanking all the panelists for their time and input. Thank you very much.